Destroy doubt. Build greatness. There is a silent war happening inside nearly every human being alive. It is not fought with weapons. It is not announced on the news. No crowd gathers to watch it. No medals are given for surviving it. And yet this war decides more destinies than any battle ever recorded in history. It is the war between doubt and belief, between the voice that whispers you are not enough and the force within you that knows you were born for more, between the part of you that wants safety and the part of you that was designed for greatness. Most people never realize that their life is not being destroyed by lack of opportunity. It is being suffocated by hesitation. They think the reason they are stuck is because they do not have money, support, connections, timing, education, resources, or luck. But beneath all of those excuses, there is something deeper, darker, more dangerous. Doubt. Doubt is the unseen chain around the mind. Doubt is the thief that enters without noise and steals your future while you are still making plans. Doubt is what turns giants into spectators. Doubt is what causes people with incredible gifts to live ordinary lives. It does not need to kill your dream in one moment. It only needs to convince you to wait one more day, then one more week, then one more year, then one more lifetime. And that is how greatness is buried, not in failure, in delay, not in defeat, in uncertainty. Not because a person had no power, but because they never fully trusted the power they had. Look at the story of nearly every person who ever changed the world. Before the applause came the ridicule. Before the breakthrough came the darkness. Before the world called them brilliant, dangerous amounts of doubt tried to persuade them. They were foolish. Thomas Edison was not handed confidence by the world. He built it in the furnace of repeated failure. Abraham Lincoln did not walk from victory to victory like some man untouched by pain. He was broken, tested, defeated, and scarred by setbacks that would have ended weaker spirits. Henry Ford was told his ideas were absurd. Walt Disney was fired for supposedly lacking imagination. Think about that. A man whose vision would shape generations was once judged as a person without vision. History is filled with examples of men and women who were underestimated by others. But the real miracle is that they refuse to underestimate themselves. That is the dividing line. Greatness is not reserved for the chosen few. It is built by those who make a decision in the presence of fear. Not after fear leaves, not after certainty arrives. In the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of resistance, in the middle of inner chaos, the world has taught people to wait until they feel ready. But greatness has never belonged to the ready. It has always belonged to the committed. You must understand this at the deepest level of your soul. You do not become great by eliminating every obstacle outside of you. You become great by mastering what is happening inside of you. Your outer life will always mirror your inner world. If your thoughts are scattered, your life will be scattered. If your belief is weak, your actions will be weak. If your vision is blurred by fear, your results will be blurred by inconsistency. But when the inner world becomes disciplined, when the mind becomes clear, when the heart becomes anchored in purpose, then something begins to shift. Reality starts responding to the force of your conviction. This is why the first victory is never external. The first victory is mental. It happens the moment you stop negotiating with your own excuses. It happens the moment you become tired of betraying your potential. It happens the moment you look at your life and say, enough. Enough waiting, enough shrinking, enough pretending I was made for mediocrity. Enough asking permission to become who I already know I am. Because, make no mistake, doubt is not humility. Doubt is often disguised surrender. It wears the costume of being realistic. It sounds intelligent, it sounds cautious, it sounds mature, but most of the time it is simply fear trying to sound. It is fear speaking with polished language. It is fear offering you comfort in exchange for your destiny. It is fear saying, stay where it is safe, stay where it is familiar, stay where no one can laugh at you, stay where no one can reject you, stay where you never have to discover what you are truly capable of. And many people obey that voice for years. They build entire lives around avoiding discomfort. They avoid the risk of failure, and in doing so, they guarantee the tragedy of never truly living. They become experts at explaining why now is not the time. They become masters at creating reasons that sound valid. But deep down, in quiet moments, they know the truth. They know there is something greater calling them. They know there is a version of themselves they have not yet met. They know they were not born merely to survive the week, pay the bills, entertain themselves, and slowly disappear. They know there is fire in them, but knowing is not enough. Potential means nothing if it remains trapped in imagination. Greatness only begins when belief becomes action. The mind is a garden, and doubt is a weed that grows fast in unattended soil. If you do not deliberately plant thoughts of purpose, discipline, vision, faith, and determination, then fear will grow by default. Negativity does not need effort. Limitation does not need training. Average is automatic. Greatness is intentional. That is why so many people drift towards smaller lives than they were meant to live. They let the world program them before they ever learn to program themselves. They absorb the opinions of broken people. They inherit fears that were never theirs. They build identities based on criticism, rejection, embarrassment, and temporary defeat. And then they wonder why they cannot move forward. You cannot build greatness on a foundation of borrowed limitation. You cannot live powerfully while secretly agreeing with every voice that ever doubted you. At some point, you have to become mentally independent. At some point, you have to stop asking the world who you are and start declaring it for yourself. At some point, you have to realize that the opinions surrounding your life are not the authority over your life. Your vision must become louder than their noise. That is what made men like Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill so powerful. They understood that thought is not a small thing. Thought is the blueprint of destiny. Every building begins as an idea. Every movement begins as a belief. Every empire begins as an image held in the mind of someone bold enough to trust what they cannot yet prove. Before wealth becomes visible, it is mental. Before success becomes public, it is private. Before the world sees victory, the mind must first accept it as possible. And this is where most people collapse, not because they lack ability, but because they lack sustained belief. They start with excitement, but they cannot continue when the results are slow. They begin with passion, but they retreat when reality does not immediately reward them. They want the harvest, but they do not respect the season of planting. They want the mountain, but they resist the climb. They want transformation, but they do not want the death of the old self required to achieve it. They want applause without endurance, victory without scars, significance without sacrifice. But life has never worked that way. The oak tree does not burst from the earth in one afternoon. The diamond is not formed in comfort. Steel is not strengthened in stillness. Every powerful thing is shaped under pressure, and so are you. The pain you resist may be the very force trying to prepare you for the level you keep praying to reach. Understand this with absolute clarity. Doubt is not merely an emotion. It is a pattern. It is a habit of thought. It is repetition. It is a mental reflex built over years of disappointment, criticism, fear, and hesitation. A person does not wake up one morning and suddenly distrust their own power. They have trained themselves into uncertainty, often without realizing it. They have rehearsed worst-case scenarios until anxiety feels like wisdom. They have repeated stories of failure until struggle feels permanent. They have looked at temporary conditions and called them identity. They have said, "This is just who I am," when in truth it was only who they had practiced being. That means doubt can be unlearned. And once you understand that, everything begins to change. Because if fear was learned, faith can be learned. If weakness was repeated, strength can be repeated. If small thinking became familiar, then bold thinking can become familiar too. The mind is not a prison unless you keep decorating the cell. The mind can become a command center. It can become a place of order, intensity, purpose, and inner authority. But it will never happen by accident. You must take responsibility for what enters your thoughts, what remains in your environment, what language you use when you speak to yourself, and what standards you tolerate in your daily life. This is where self-mastery stops sounding poetic and starts becoming practical. Listen carefully. Every day you are either feeding doubt or starving it. Every day you are either strengthening your future or weakening it. There is no neutral. The books you read, the conversations you entertain, the habits you repeat, the excuses you allow, the mornings you waste, the goals you postpone, the promises you break to yourself. They are all shaping your identity. And identity is the engine of destiny. A man does not rise above the story he believes about himself for very long. A woman does not build a powerful life while secretly identifying as helpless. You may produce a burst of effort for a day or two, but eventually your actions return to the level of your self-image. That is why the battle against doubt is not just about feeling better. It is about becoming someone new, not pretending. Becoming, that process begins with truth, not comfort. Truth. You must tell yourself the truth about where you are. You must tell yourself the truth about how often you have delayed your own greatness. You must tell yourself the truth about the habits that are weakening your character. You must tell yourself the truth about the environments that are draining your courage. You must tell yourself the truth about the people whose voices have become louder in your mind than your own purpose. You must tell yourself the truth about how many times you have called it bad luck when it was actually lack of discipline. How many times you called it confusion when it was really fear of commitment. How many times you called it overthinking when it was simply avoidance into a mering intectual tico. Truth is painful, but truth is cleansing. Truth strips away illusion. Truth removes the soft pillows from the prison cell. Truth forces you to see that your life will not change because you want it to. It will change because you decide to become the kind of person who can create change consistently. Is common, decision is rare. That is why so many people remain trapped in cycles. They want success, but they are motioned to come for it. They want wealth, but they resist the discipline that wealth demands. They want peace, but they keep entertaining Iwas. They want confidence, but they keep practicing self-betrayal. They want a stronger life, but they keep bowing to weaker habits. And habits are never small. A habit is a vote. Every action you repeat is voting for the person you are becoming. Every morning you rise with purpose. You cast a vote for greatness. Every time you quit early, you cast a vote for mediocrity. Every time you honor your word, you cast a vote for power. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you cast a vote for inner weakness. Over time, those votes become your life. This is why discipline is sacred. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. It is the proof that your future matters more than your mood. It is the refusal to let temporary emotion override permanent vision. People talk about motivation as if it is the highest force. It is not. Motivation is beautiful, but it is unstable. It rises and falls like weather. Discipline is deeper. Discipline is what remains when excitement disappears. Discipline is what carries the dream across long seasons of silence. Discipline is what made men like Henry Ford continue when the world laughed. It is what made Lincoln remain standing after defeat after defeat. It is what made Edison continue after thousands of attempts. Those men were not superhuman. They were governed by something stronger than emotion. They had become loyal to a vision greater than discomfort. And that loyalty is what separates dreamers from builders. Agnon can imagine a better life. Few will construct one. To build greatness, you must become a builder. Builders do not worship convenience. Builders do not stop because the day is hard. Builders do not ask every hour whether they feel inspired. Builders understand something. The average person does not. They understand that the future is being assembled in the invisible. In the choices, no one applauds. In the hours, no one sees. In the repetition that appears boring to the untrained eye, but looks holy to the person with purpose. Greatness is often built in monotony before it is revealed in magnificence. There will be days when nothing seems to move. Days when you work and see no reward. Days when the mind is heavy and the body is tired and doubt tries to return wearing familiar clothes. On those days, remember this. The seed does not look like the tree. The beginning never resembles the final form. A cathedral begins as lines on paper. A symphony begins as silence. A revolution begins as one idea protected by one courageous mind. Do not insult your future because your present looks unfinished. Everything powerful begins in a form that appears small. Most people abandon the process because they do not know how to honor small beginnings. They despise the early stage. They are embarrassed by the first attempt, the first video, the first business idea, the first uncertain step, the first clumsy version of themselves. But every master was once awkward. Every empire was once fragile. Every legend once had to act before they were celebrated. There is no shame in beginning small. The only shame is in refusing to begin because your pride cannot tolerate imperfection. Pride has murdered more dreams than failure ever did. The truth is, you are not called to look impressive in the beginning. You are called to be faithful in the beginning. faithful to the process, faithful to the vision, faithful to your development, faithful when no one understands you, faithful when the room is silent, faithful when progress is invisible, faithful when the old life is ending and the new life has not yet fully arrived. That is the wilderness where character is forged. That is where a person stops needing external proof and begins generating internal power. And internal power changes everything, because once a person develops inner authority, the world loses its ability to control them. They stop collapsing every time they are criticized. They stop freezing every time they are rejected. They stop doubting themselves every time the path becomes unclear. They begin to understand that uncertainty is not a signal to quit. It is often a signal to grow. The fog on the road does not mean the road disappears. It only means you must move with greater faith. Faith is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. People imagine faith as passive, as soft, as abstract. But real faith is a weapon. Real faith is disciplined vision under pressure. It is the ability to hold a picture in your mind when circumstances are screaming the opposite. It is the refusal to surrender your inner image just because the outer world has not caught up yet. It is not fantasy. It is not denial. It is focused allegiance to possibility. This was the force that made men like Walt Disney continue after business failures and rejection. He saw a kingdom where others saw a sketch. He saw wonder where others saw risk. He saw a world not yet visible. And he honored that vision long enough for the visible world to eventually bow to it. This was the same force that drove Andrew Carnegie from poverty to industrial power. He did not begin with riches in his hands. He began with riches in his mind. He began with a belief so steady that reality slowly had no choice but to organize around it. That is not magic. That is law. The world responds to sustained internal direction. Not instantly, not cheaply, but eventually, thought becomes action. Action becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character becomes destiny. That sequence is shaping your life, whether you respect it or not. The question is whether you are using it deliberately or letting it use you unconsciously. You cannot afford to be unconscious any longer. The age you live in is filled with distraction, comparison, noise, artificial urgency, and endless opportunities to abandon yourself. Never before have so many people had access to information while remaining so disconnected from wisdom. Never before have so many had the tools to create while lacking the discipline to focus. Never before has it been easier to look busy while building nothing. The modern world rewards appearance. Greatness requires substance. The modern world encourages reaction. Greatness requires intention. The modern world trains people to seek constant stimulation. Greatness is born in concentration. So if you want to destroy doubt and build greatness, you must reclaim the governance of your attention. A scattered mind cannot build a powerful life. A distracted soul cannot hear its own calling. Every time you let your focus be hijacked by trivial things, you are giving away the most valuable asset you possess. Attention is life force. Attention is creative power. Attention is the gateway through which your future is built. What you repeatedly focus on, you strengthen. What you strengthen, you become. If you focus on obstacles, your identity becomes burdened. If you focus on fear, your body begins to live in fear. If you focus on criticism, you become a prisoner of opinion. But if you focus on purpose, on growth, on service, on mastery, on the next right action, then your life begins to gather force. You become dangerous to limitation. This is why clarity matters so much. A confused life is often not the result of lacking option. It is the result of lacking decision. Many people say they do not know what they want, but often that is not fully true. Many times they know exactly what they want, but they are terrified of the responsibility that comes with admitting it. Because once you admit what you truly want, excuses begin to die. Once you name the vision, you can no longer hide inside vagueness. Once you declare the mountain, you must face the climb, but clarity is liberation. A person with a clear purpose can endure what would break someone without one. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote that he who has a why can bear almost any how. That principle echoes through every age. Purpose reorganizes pain. Purpose makes suffering meaningful. Purpose transforms discipline from burden into devotion. When you know why you are rising early, why you are studying, why you are sacrificing, why you are enduring, then the hardship changes shape. It stops feeling random. It becomes sacred. Look at Abraham Lincoln. He carried sorrow that would have drowned many men, yet he remained anchored to a cause bigger than his personal suffering. Look at Nelson Mandela, who endured decades in prison without surrendering the inner architecture of his purpose. Look at Helen Keller,